This video is going to dive into for loops a little bit further, and we're going to look at that third and final type. So by the end of today, you should be able to do for loops types 1 and 2 from the previous lessons video, and then for loops type 3, which have a few more parameters that we have to work with. Same learning targets we've seen the last few days. Concept of an iteration is something we should be able to describe. We should be able to write a for loop in Python to solve a problem, and we should be able to trace through a for loop and track its values as the program runs. So for loop type 3 is a little bit more in depth than the previous two types. So here you can see there are a couple more parameters. There's a couple things inside of the parentheses that are a little bit more specific, but it starts off the same way. For, and we pick a variable. This can be I, X, value, number, whatever you want it to be. And you'll notice here we're back to having in range. But what's different here than compared to the other two is that we actually have to input 3 different values inside of here. So what we're going to do is this first number that we enter in will always be our beginning value for this variable type. This one right here is your ending parameter, or your ending value. So it's not exactly the value we end on, but it helps us to find when our for loop ends. And then this here is called, this third number is called our step, and that's how we're going to find our next value for this variable I. So here, or whatever we name it, I, X, whatever. So, a couple of key notes. The variable always starts at this beginning value. The variable is then changed by the step. So if it's 7, we add 7 every time. If it's -2, we subtract 2 every time, whatever it might be. And then the loop runs until that beginning value equals or surpasses that ending value. So it's going to either equal it or surpass it, and that's what I mean by it helps us to find when our for loop ends. But this type 3, we have what are called 3 parameters, or 3 values that we need to know in order to run that loop. So these are easiest to learn if we just dive in and do an example. So here we have an example. It says for I in range, and then we have our 3 values, and we're going to print I to the screen. So I'm going to trace it over here. I have my I value, and then I have my output, which is everything that is printing to the screen. So I starts at 1. So it doesn't start at 0 or it doesn't start at a different value like the previous ones. It starts at 1. Then, because I have these 3 values and it says range, I know that this is type 3. Now remember, this value over here is what's called our step. So it being a positive 7 means we're going to add 7 each time it runs. So the first time through, I is equal to 1. We're going to print I to the screen, so that's our output. And then as we loop back up every time, we're going to add 7. So the second time this runs, I increases to 1 plus 7, which is 8. Then our ending condition is when we get to 24 or we pass 24. So it really means that this loop is going to run while I is less than 24, because we have to get to 24 or surpass it. So we've added 7, we're at 8. 8 is still less than 24, so we're going to print it to the screen again. And then we add our step, which is 7, and we get 8 plus 7 is 15. 15 is still less than 24, so we're going to print it to the screen, add 7 to it as we loop back up, so that's going to become 22. 22 is still less than 24, so we go through the loop again. Here we're going to print 22 to the screen, and then we're going to add that 7 again, which this time around this condition is false, and as a result we would pop out of the loop and move on our way. So notice here that this loop runs in full a total of 4 times. You can see that it ran 1, 2, 3, 4. On this 5th number, it was stopped and it didn't run. So example 2, just to see a slightly different version in action. Notice here we didn't use I, we're using something called value. You can name this variable whatever you'd like it to be. So here I have value. This is what's going to change values every single time. And again, I'm going to output to the screen. So here I have, we start at 3. So value starts at 3, and this tells me I'm going to add 5 every single time because that's my step. This is my ending condition, so I'm going to run while value is less than 30. So here we start at 3, we print 3 to the screen, then we add 5, so it becomes 8. 8 is still less than 30, so we print 8 to the screen. We then loop back around, we add 5, so we get to 13. 13, still less than 30, so we print it to the screen. Loop back up, it changes to 18. It's going to run that time. Loop back up, this changes to 23, still less than 30. So we keep going. Loop back up, changes to 28, print 28 to the screen. And then loop back up. This time it changes to 33. 33 is no longer less than 30, so we're going to stop as a result of this 33, and our program is done. And we can see that our loop ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times before we actually had to pop out of it. And final example, this one's a little bit different because we have a negative step, so I want to show you how that works in Python code. So we have for number, so we're going to have a num that we need to track, and then we're going to output to the screen as well. So here we're starting at 20. Remember, this is our starting value. So we're starting at 20, and this means I'm going to subtract 2 every time. So we're going down. And remember, this ending value we need to equal or surpass. So to surpass this one, essentially num is going to run while it's greater than 10 because it's starting at 20 and it's going down. Once it gets to 10 or passes 10, it's going to stop. So here we're at 20, we're going to print number to the screen. So we have 20. As we're looping up, we subtract 2. So we're at 18. 18 is still greater than 10, so we print 18 to the screen, loop around, and we're at 16. 16 is still greater than 10, so we print it to the screen, subtract 2. 14, still greater than 10, print it to the screen, subtract 2. 12 is still greater than 10, print it to the screen, subtract 2. It's this 10 because we equal it or surpass it that stops our for loop from running. So at 10 we stop, we don't run it, and we can see our loop ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times. So notice that Python is smart enough to realize that if you have a decreasing condition, that it's going to be going down, and as a result we need to flip that inequality sign, and once we get to 10 or surpass it, we are done. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're actually going to type all 3 of these in together and verify that our tracing was correct and see that Python actually does work in these ways.